on to what do you plug these access points into? Um, and we talked about this previously as well, and I've probably had this conversation with many of you. But if I'm getting faster and faster and more bandwidth out of my APs, then something kind of needs to happen on the switch side, right? For a long time, we've had gigabit connections. And so the problem is, as we start to exceed that gigabit link, I need to come up with a new access method. Well, Cisco saw this coming, and they worked in partnership with the IEEE to come up with a new standard known as multi-gig. So you can see that lovely animation there, where we go from 1 gig all the way to 2.5 or 5 or even 10 gig potentially, which gives us that extra throughput that we will need from servicing all these clients. We'll talk a little bit about that going forward. But like I said, it was built in concert with the IEEE. So it is an industry standard at this point. Devices, should support that from a standards perspective. And there's a couple different speed options when it comes to mGig. 10 megs has gotten left behind. Sorry, all those devices that still operate at 10 megs. We can't support that anymore. But 100 megs, 1 gig. And then we have these new specs as far as 2.5, 5 gig, even 10 gig capable across your copper lines. Now, the good news is most everything we see at this point maxes out at 5 gig. For example, like 9120s, just this goes Wi-Fi 6 kind of standard, has a 2.5 gig port. We felt like that would be sufficient for the traffic you'd be connecting there. 9130s, the new 9136, the MR57 that I just showed, have 5 gig ports on the back end. I'm not really seeing at this point devices that support 10 gig. We just don't think that, you connect a bunch of clients and you're going to exceed that 5 gig space at this point. And if you did with a 9136 on the Wi-Fi 6E standard, we've got, dual connections to get us to that 10 gig space. But what I want to emphasize here is that Cat 5e cabling, because cabling is going to become important as part of this transition as well, supports standard length, 300 feet on the 5 gig, throughput rating. Once you try and push 10 gig, then Cat 5e starts to fall away. But for, the next several years, certainly, as long as you have at least Cat 5e deployed in your environment, there's no, considerations from a cabling perspective that it's going to support up to 5 gigs. So let's look at some of the products. Now, these are out here. We've deployed lots of these already. Some of you probably have them. But for those of you that haven't seen them, these are the Cisco Catalyst 9300s. Meraki's very similar. You get into a 24-port switch, and it's an mGig capable switch. They also have gigabits, but let's focus on the mGig for now. These ports, all 24 of them, will operate at 2.5, 5, and 10 gig. This other 24 port operates at 2.5, 5, and 10 gig. But then you start to get into the 48 ports, and we're pushing a whole lot of traffic at this point. So the ASICs behind it and everything are trying to do some balancing. This UXM comes with the first 36 ports are 2.5, and then the last 12 are up to 10. So, that could work really well. Just something to be aware of when you're installing these. If you're connecting to like 9136, I'd like to cable those into these last 12 ports. Now, I'm a keep it simple person, so I really like this switch, the 48UN, which just all the ports are 5. So no muss, no fuss. I don't need to think about it. Just plug it in wherever you want, and you're going to get at least 5 gigs out of it, which, like I said, the APs, that's largely where they're at. If you got a couple, 10 gig capable servers or something like that, then maybe the UXM is a little bit better choice because we can go all the way up to that speed. A couple of the options. Now, this is the 9300 switch. We also have some lesser switches in the hierarchy. So this is the 9300L. The only thing to be aware of when we're looking at these, and my team is always happy to walk through this with you, but that we generally end up with fewer mGig capable ports. So in this case, I've got 10 gig or 12 ports, for example. on each one of these switches. I look at the 24 port version, and now there's 8 mGig ports. That may be sufficient for the number of APs that are connected in the closet. I'm not really looking at connecting endpoints at this time. With mGig ports, it's really all about the APs. But we just want to be aware of, one, where those ports lie, and you can kind of see them highlighted in blue here on the bottom, right? So these last 8 ports are going to be mGig capable. These last 12 ports are going to be mGig capable. That's kind of etched into the switch physically. But as we look at those switches, it's not going to be all 48. It's not going to be all 24. We're targeting kind of those last few ports there, and we'll do some planning around, do we have sufficient ports?